So U.S. elections are now entering a critical time. Polls suggest that the Democratic candidate Kamala Harris as well as Republican Donald Trump are now tied at 48% each, with only 9 days left before November the 5th. Before the November 5th elections, what's the latest in the chase for the presidential seat? Let's now bring in foreign correspondent John Matisonn. John, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for making time for us. Considering the campaigns that took place yesterday as well, how would you characterize these elections between the two-horse race?
Well, it's really nail-biting. It's down to the wire. Kamala Harris came into the race 100 days ago or so after Biden withdrew, and she had a very strong momentum going her way, all the way, and she was rising and rising in the polls all the way until a couple of weeks ago. And then it seemed to have turned. And the last 2 weeks or so, Trump has been gaining ground. Not a huge amount and not rapid, but he is gaining ground a little bit. If you look at the latest, the most reliable, considered the most reliable scientific analysis on the website 538, yesterday, a couple of days ago, they had Trump winning by most likely by a margin of 51%, most likely to win. Today it's 52. So that's about the closest you're going to get to where it is.
Mm-hmm. Which is an interesting one. And I wonder whether Donald Trump having the backing of an Elon Musk perhaps could have helped propel him, seeing how hard Elon Musk has been campaigning for Donald Trump as well. But we know about the impact of social media and what it meant for Barack Obama's first election, was it back in 2008?
Well, yes, that's right. But I think actually the most valuable thing Musk is doing for him now is, it's with the race so close, and as you know, it's only a handful of states that are really in contention and that will determine the outcome. And before Musk got involved, Trump's Get Out the Vote organization was quite weak, and the Democrats had a very strong one. And Musk has moved himself to Pennsylvania to run the Get Out the Vote campaign for Trump in the key states. And he's put his money and his organizational skills to work for Trump there. And that's a big deal.
Okay, so what are the key states that we should be looking at?
The most important single state is Pennsylvania, because it has, of all the swing states, it has the largest number of votes to the Electoral College that actually elects the president. But if Harris wins Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, those are the three Rust Belt states in the north center of the country, she's probably going to win. If she loses Pennsylvania, it's going to be very hard for her to win, unless she gets a couple of the southern states like Georgia, North Carolina, and Arizona. So those six. But it's so close, Eldred, that there's the American system is full of anomalies. There is a single electoral college vote in Nebraska, just because they have different rules, and there's one seat that could go Harris's way, and it's even possible that it could be down to that one seat.
Yeah, and with that said, I wonder with the campaigns as well, and seeing the strategy that is being employed by the two front runners, whether it is getting an Elon Musk, for instance, to give you an endorsement, or Beyonce to give Kamala Harris an endorsement, and Michelle Obama as well, of course, backing Kamala Harris, whether what they say now could swing undecided voters, or are we at a stage now where there are voters that already are clear about what it is and who it is that they want to vote back into power? Because also you need to consider that you have Kamala Harris, who's also the Vice President of the United States. So does she remain part of the administration, or does Donald Trump come back?
Well, look, the fact is that endorsements don't really determine election outcomes generally. I mean, if you remember, Hillary Clinton had a lot of the same endorsements, but it didn't get her to win. I think in the bottom line is it's still the candidate themselves. And frankly, the public isn't mad about either candidate. There's not a majority that really like Trump, and there's not a majority that really like Harris. And that's the problem. And that's why I think the Get Out the Vote organization on the ground, remember, it can only be margins of 10 or 20,000 votes, even though there'll be 160 million voters.
Yeah, so Harris in Philadelphia on the 14th trip to the state since Joe Biden withdrew from the race. Is that significant at all? Would she be able to convince the voters why they should put confidence in her?
Well, Philadelphia is in Pennsylvania, and as I say, that's the key state. But you know, her closing argument has switched from focusing on what she can do for the country to saying don't let Trump in. He's such a danger. And there's a big argument going on among the advisors about whether this is the right strategy. Do you want to scare people into voting for you, or do you want to love them into voting, hug them into voting for you? And this is the dilemma they're in now.
Yeah, and then Trump's messaging also yesterday, for instance, of course, making America great again, but also making America affordable again, which for me was quite interesting, which perhaps also points to what some may believe to be the mismanagement of the U.S. economy. Does Donald Trump have a case there?
Well, he does and he doesn't. The fact is, Eldred, what probably your viewers will be surprised to know is that under Biden, the American economy has grown exceptionally well. It's the fastest growing of the democratic countries, of the Western countries, by far. And the stock market has been shooting the lights out under Biden. And he doesn't get credit for that, in part because of inflation. Inflation is really the thing. If there wasn't inflation, I think Biden would be looking good and Harris would be looking very good. The problem is inflation came along, and that's mostly not Biden's fault, although you could say he contributed a little bit to it. But inflation came about, remember, because of COVID, because of supply chain problems, and then, of course, the Ukraine war. And that has been a worldwide phenomenon. As you know, we've had to deal with it today in South Africa. But that's not primarily Biden's fault. But, you know, the thing is that politics isn't a fair game. If you're the president, when something bad happens, you get blamed, whether it was your fault or not.
Well, the Feds were signaling the end of the high inflation, considering also the rate cut. But some people also accusing the Feds of playing into the hands of the Democrats, and perhaps maybe the Democrats then using that to their advantage to say that, listen, this is what we've been able to achieve. And you can see that there has been also these rate cuts that have come from the Fed, higher than what the markets were expecting.
Yes, but Eldred, the Fed chairman was appointed by Trump, not by Biden. So to say that this is the Democrats doing is just doesn't really stand up, I don't think. The problem for Biden and Harris is the timing. It's come a little bit late. I think there are going to be more rate cuts regardless of who's president. As you know, there are going to be rate cuts in South Africa too. They've started as well, a bit slower than the Americans. We're going to get rate cuts. Inflation worldwide has been tamed substantially. No, this is not a Democratic plot. The governor is a Republican.
But we know with politics they throw everything. they throw everything out. But let's quickly go on to foreign policy. What happens if Donald Trump does come back to Washington? What happens to America's foreign policy? We know, of course, America's involvement in the two wars, the one in Ukraine as well as the one in Gaza. What that means for international relations if a Donald Trump becomes president again.
Well, look, there are a lot of imponderables there, but there are a few things that I think are pretty obvious. First of all, Trump wants to end the war in Ukraine fast, and he's prepared to make a lot of compromises that Biden or Harris wouldn't. So I think he could well force an end to the Ukraine war on a basis that Ukraine is divided and it loses control of the sections of the country that Russia invaded. I think that's sort of on the cards. Might not happen as quickly as he might like, but I think that's where we're going. And of course, that will have a ripple effect in NATO, because in NATO, you know, many of the European countries in NATO see Trump as hostile to NATO. On the Israel-Gaza one, that's the differences could be a little smaller. I think, on Israel, you know, Trump is very pro-Israel and very anti-Iran. I mean, in one of the reasons for this war, it can be attributed to the fact that it was Trump who tore up the Iran nuclear treaty, even though it was widely accepted that Iran was in full compliance. And that meant that the Iranians felt that they had to move back to a strategy of arming their surrogates, Hamas and Hezbollah and so on. So there you could see Trump taking a much more pro-Israel stand. I don't think he's going to keep telling Israel as Biden does to tone it down and avoid war. A wider war.
Yeah. So then essentially, I wonder what that means then for voters, like we've seen during the primaries, around how the Democrats, for instance, have handled specifically the war in Palestine, if there is going to be a continuation even under the Trump administration, or perhaps maybe intensification under the Trump administration.
Yeah, well, look, I think under a Trump administration, I think those who are pro-Palestinian or anti-Israel or anti-Israel's war will be less happy. I think Trump, when he was in president last time, he gave in to every Israeli demand and desire. Yeah. He moved the embassy to Jerusalem. You know, he tore up the Iran treaty, which independent analysts were very much opposed to him tearing up that treaty.
Yeah, and of course, that was before 42,000 people were killed. But in conclusion, John, what does a Trump win mean for Africa?
Well, I think in the first instance, I would say neglect. You know, you've heard he's said disparaging remarks about Africa. He's not really interested in Africa. I don't think it's going to be a priority. As you know, the American government is a big machine. A lot of things will carry on as before. But you know, Biden. The Biden policies are complicated in some ways, but Biden and Harris have a real sympathy for South Africa. They really admired Nelson Mandela, almost worshipped him, you could say. So they tend to be more sympathetic, and the Republicans are not. The Republicans in Congress, who would be Trump's allies, have called for, a review of South Africa's admission to the AGOA trade treaty, to the tariff benefits we get there. So Trump will be instinctively less sympathetic to South Africa, although, he's not going to be rushing to raise big issues. As you know, Biden is coming to Angola at this month. So he's trying to build ties, particularly with Angola, where the US have put in a lot of investment in the railway line. Yeah.
John, thank you so much for your time. Foreign correspondent there, John Matisonn, ahead of the US elections, which will be taking place on the 5th of November. There are some states where some voting has started already.